Hi, everyone. So you all know the general rules by now. Generally, people put their hand up if they want to ask a question or if they want to have something to say. We don't have any guests on tonight, so it's literally just almost like a free-for-all discussion on all things RV, maybe even some of the latest UAP, UFO revelations, because that was asked for in one of the comments. If you don't want to ask a question verbally with your microphone, feel free to try to type it in the chat window as well, and myself or someone else will pick that up and try to ask that on your behalf. So, with that said, anyone got anything they'd like to discuss or comment on or ask or anything to kick this off? I think it was quiet.
Well, I have to say that I'm enjoying your calendar of the countdown for June.
Yes, it's an interesting month. I did see on some UFO forums yesterday that certain people in UFO research have been told that there's going to be a new release, not the report, but a new release of some. So I'm guessing new video files on Tuesday, and they were mentioning words like Pentagon and stuff. So we might be getting we might be getting some more interesting footage.
Well, it sure seems like they're trying to milk this as much as they can.
Yes, it's interesting, and myself and quite a few other people have tried to debate what the agenda might be with this, because these people don't do anything without having an agenda behind what they're doing. They haven't kept this secret for the last 7 decades for no reason at all.
Well, it seems to me that it's most likely a precursor to trying to let out some of the technology. That it's not really going to be here's the aliens, here's the different species that have been involved, the different things. It's really about, well, we know these things are out there. They've got some tech that's pretty cool. And oh, gee, we found one, no bodies. And we're basically going to reveal the technology, that some of it that we've gotten from them. I don't think they're going to do anything as it relates to really exposing entities.
Yeah, that does make sense. It does seem to be a stepped kind of disclosure campaign. I think it's been going on for at least 2 decades with films and media. And yeah, you're right. It probably will be. Oh, look, we have some parts from a UFO, and look at the amazing technology we can get from this. And that will be the next stage that people can think about for a couple of years before we get to a stage at some point in the future where they might say, "Oh, and by the way, these are the beings behind this."
Yeah, it's certainly thrown up an interesting discussion among the UFO community about the types and numbers of different entities out there, and the delineations on who's a positive galactic federation, or if it's some of the more negative ones that are battling amongst themselves for control of us. But as far as I'm concerned, disclosure happened thousands of years ago and written about in all the ancient mythos. Literally every civilization has some component in their history about beings from above came down, gave us stuff, told us things, and we wrote it down. So this is, to me, is more of a revealing of the secrecy that it is disclosure.
Yeah, me too. And I think I've told people in this group in the past, I've spent a lot of years since I was 19 years old collecting everything I could on UFO research. I stopped in 2005 because it got to a point of when you had every piece of public footage you could get, and tens of thousands of FOIA documents, and all the books I could possibly manage. It got to a stage of, where do you go from here? It's real. They're out there. It's just waiting for everyone else to catch up now. And I think that's what's been happening ever since. Although it's a dodgy area still. There's lots of disinformation going on all the time.
Agreed.
But it's great. It's great that the UFOs, or UAPs as they call them now, are has always and still closely integrated in remote viewing research as well.
Well, Courtney and the group over at Farsight has certainly been cranking out some interesting stuff.
I'm not a subscriber to Farsight stuff, so I haven't seen any of it for a while, other than what some of the people on the Discord group show me every now and again.
There's some very interesting stuff they've been doing, and the last one was, I think it's called it's about a group that was hitherto unknown up in the Himalayas around Tibet, and they're not associated with the Galactic Federation. They have something to do with another original group where the Sanskrit writings came from. And I got to tell you, every time I look at Sanskrit and any of the Vedic stuff, it's some pretty deep and amazing writings and concepts that they put forward there. So the last one that they did, they said that these writings were from this group, and they were the original, not only the Sanskrit writing, which seems to baffle most linguists and people who research that, but there's some very interesting things as it relates to tones and harmonies and essentially frequencies, which to me is what remote viewing is. Remote viewing, and I've been following it since the mid 90s. I'm not a practitioner. I'm starting to get into it. I follow just about everything I can. But it seems to me that remote viewing is simply trying to find the frequency that existed or exists within whichever target is identified. And you simply dial into that frequency at a really simplistic level.
Anyone else got any comments on the UFOs, their personal experiences or research that they've come across? I know Russell's got some.
I don't have any personal experiences. Mine tend to be more paranormal, I guess,
Okay.
my life experience. But I've always been interested, Daz, in since you studied it so much and you remote view, what can you summarize the conclusion that you've come to?
About well, I see. I don't like to call them aliens, even though other people do. You know, there are some of the alleged experiences, abductions, and other ones. They do claim that they've towed and given descriptions of star systems and places where they come from. I don't think that's the whole story, though. I think there's a lot more happening than we possibly know. You know, as human beings, we sometimes tend to think black and white too much. I think there's huge amounts of grayscale in what's happening here, and probably for the entire existence of humanity, there have been different life forms that are most probably non-physical, but also maybe dimensional in time and space that interact with us. And you know, we just label them in all different types of ways depending on where you come from in the world. You know, angels, elves, fairies, all that kind of stuff. And you know, the modern interpretation is gray aliens mainly. You know, there are other ones like alleged reptilians and Nordic looking ones and stuff. So I think a lot's happening. I think personally from what I've seen, and you know, I've probably seen more than the normal person because I went out of my way to collect it. I think that if you do that, there's an overwhelming library of evidence to prove that there is something happening with physical type craft. But whether they are dimensional or from another planet, I can't confirm. Other than you know, some of the probes and some of the imagery and video films that come back from planets in our solar system do seem to show some really interesting anomalies that lead me to believe that some of what we experience is what we class as alien or extraterrestrial. And you know, the RV seems to indicate that as well. But as we know with remote viewing, if you can't feed back it's hard to quantify the data as much. I don't throw it out like most people tell us you should do, because I also base the data on the credibility and reliability of the viewer doing the RV and how they performed over a long period of time. And you know, I allow that a certain amount of weight in my decision. But yeah, I think it's Sorry, it's a long-winded answer. I think there's a lot going on. I think it's way more complicated than we can ever imagine.
I want to say something at some point on this too.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, so people may know that in transdimensional systems, there were at least 5 people who were remote viewers who experienced alien visitation, not just Prue with the gray dude in the bathroom, but also 4 other remote viewers that I know who claimed that hammerhead aliens or something like that were appearing in their bedrooms and interfering with them. We also have Angela Thompson Smith, who is able, she says, to channel aliens as she sits at the typewriter and types. So there's another strong tie between, let's say, a practicing remote viewer and aliens or UFOnauts, whatever you want to call them. So I guess my question too is, has anybody else in this field experienced such an intimate connection? And I have to say, I never experienced anything like that when I was in transdimensional systems, nor did Don Walker or Roma. We were the 3 interns scheduled to be on the next team, the pro team, and get paid when we shut down. So I've never experienced that, although I've believed that there are UFOs that are not just figments of imagination since 1953. So and I've studied the field quite a bit also, although not recently. But so this connection between actually sort of practicing remote viewers and aliens, and not just stuff like Ingo had, where he meets them in the grocery store or in the lake. So I just raised that as a topic in case anyone has any more contributions on that particular facet of it.
Okay, yeah. Daz hinted a little while ago that I had some experiences. The first thing I have to say to everybody, anytime that I talk about this one in particular, dismiss it as you will. I'm not asking you to believe it. I'm not asking you to reject it. I can only tell you my certainty level is 100% with no questions and a witness. So as a young child, I saw a gray with my physical eyes, wide awake, encountered it. My mother was a single mom. I was sleeping in the same bed with her. She woke up, screamed, freaked out, and then the thing took off. And Hal Puthoff interviewed me about this. The memory is just not in question. Subsequent to that, I had a horrific childhood of nighttime activity, to the point that I got shipped off in, like, I think it was 1969, to the child psychologist, who at that point, fortunately, was not just drugging kids. And I had to go through, a particular thing because of, what they diagnosed as night terrors. It was to the point for me that I had this little, what you call, I guess, like a broomstick cowboy thing, where it was a coat rack with a horse's head on it, and then little things that came off where you could hang stuff. So every night I would have to set that at the corner of my bed facing towards my door. I put a hat on it, put a shirt to make it look like a man or something standing at the end of my bed. Subjectively, when the experiences would come, the first thing that would happen would be like a black vortex, and it would take my voice. So when I would start to scream for my dad or my stepmom, I couldn't. Finally, I was able to break through and, get a voice out. On the times where I couldn't, literally what I did was I just hunkered down and sang the Mickey Mouse song, which was popular back in the 60s, to myself to just get through it. So I have, shall I say, a little bit of a negative disposition towards at least one faction. The rest I cannot speak to. And this went on for quite some time. I had another encounter in 2010, immediately after coming back from my first remote viewing training with Ed Dames, that left physical marks, and those were photographed. And then when I went to research the marks, there were like 30 other people with the exact same marks in the exact same spot. And well, in fact, Dad sent me a photo of one he had seen once I sent him the photo of the physical injury that I had. The Brian Vikey, a UFO researcher, had a case on his site that had a guy with the exact same marks, exact to the T photograph. And this was substantiated because of a police investigation, because children also had marks. And so the police had investigated. There were other evidential things that I won't go into. So for me, it's unquestionably real. I eventually did some memory work, recalled a couple of other things that were interesting. And then the other physical experience with my own eyes occurred in 2002. I think it was, I'm pretty sure it was 2002. It might have been 2003, but right in there. I was coming home late one night from a photography assignment. I used to do event photography when I lived in Wyoming, and went in. I lived up exactly halfway between Cody, Wyoming, and the east gate of Yellowstone, a little town called Wapiti. And that area is a rock bowl, or a granite bowl, if you will. So even if so much as a Harley went up the highway, it literally just, I mean, it would wake you up in the night, especially during the summer when like 10 or 15 Harleys would come by together. So there was nothing in that area that would make a large sound and not be noticed. The other thing there was no FAA high altitude air corridors above us. And the only time you ever saw a helicopter was if a Forest Service helicopter was dealing with like a little lightning strike fire or something like that. So I was coming home about 2:30 in the morning, as I recall, pulled in my driveway. And originally, I think, told the story, I was like a quarter mile or half mile away. I actually went back and Google Earthed it. And it was about a mile away that there was a little hill. And the only way I can describe it, I happened to just kind of be looking up. This, whatever it was, folded into our reality. It had no distinct physical shape. It was a brilliant orb, just radiating light that even illuminated the top of the little hill. And so I rolled down the window of my truck, not a sound. Then I positioned myself with my head against the back of my truck, and then I had a little oil sticker. When they give you that thing to remind you to change your oil. And I positioned the thing between two lines on that. And for at least a minute or so, it was absolutely guaranteed motionless. So then it continued. And finally I said, I'm just done with this crap. So I pulled my truck out and I went right at it. And I got about a quarter mile away, and then it folded out. That was it. And it just folded in, stayed absolutely stationary, did not make a single sound, and then folded out. The part of the story I always find very interesting was sitting right next to me was about $2,000 or $3,000 worth of camera gear. And during what I estimate to be about a 7-minute incident, it never occurred to me to even grab my camera and take a picture, which I thought was odd, because literally, I would take a picture of anything, wildlife, whatever. I always carried my camera with me. So then to top it off, and I don't know how to connect this except for it was related, at least chronologically, maybe not causatively. But the next day I went to this store, a little store called the Red Barn. And in Wyoming, people are pretty conservative. So all the grouchy old Republicans would go there every morning, drink a bunch of coffee, and just argue over everything. So I'd always go down there for that show. So I pulled down, it's a little tiny store, combo gas station with like literally 1970s pumps. This was, back in 2002. And there was the oddest, most strange energy character just standing out in the parking lot. This community had 250 post office boxes. Most of them were for seasonal people. So in the valley, the population was probably 70 to 100 during the winter, and everybody knew everybody. So this guy was completely out of context. And I felt just like it was weird, and he would not take his eyes off me. And he wasn't like black men in black, just jeans and, you know, normal clothes. So I walked past him, and the closer I got, the more uncomfortable I got. And he turned his head and followed me. So I just went past in the store, and then everybody in there was like, "Who the hell is that guy? He's so weird and creepy." And then he just looked in the window, got in a regular car, not a black SUV or anything like this, got in a regular car and just drove off, and never saw him again. How that was connected, I can't say. It just happened one after the other. And I wasn't even at the time correlating him to that event. That happened later. So 2002 was the first time I just said, okay, it's, you know, I need to start studying. So that's the first time I started studying UFOs. And for me, and I'm discarding a bunch of subjective incidents, but those two, the early childhood physical seeing of a gray, and then the 2002 seeing whatever that was in the sky, are just irrefutable and undeniable to me. So, you know, looking at this disclosure thing, one thing that I've said before, and whether it's popular or not is up to each individual. I find it very interesting that in 2017, this disclosure movement began with the New York Times, and 4 months later, Dr. Greer comes out with this whole contact protocol. And I know people, lots of people, who have decided to open their hearts, invite these beings in. I've done a full review of that film, and there's some very bizarre things stated in that film. I had a couple people, practitioners, contact me and tell me privately some things that had happened that were unsettling to them, to say the least. And I always back this up with this. I don't believe this is an evil or a negative universe. Of the potentially trillions of beings, disembodied, semi-embodied, spirit bodies, physical bodies of every type. I think, like humans, the high majority are good folks, if you will. I consider, for whatever reason, that Earth right now is in a bad neighborhood. And I think I agree with Robert's assessment that there are factions competing against themselves, not dissimilar to how gangs would compete in one city, you know, for territory. And taking that analogy a step further, in terms of the broader spectrum of the universe, if I'm in a certain aspect of Chicago, I'm in danger. But as the crow flies, maybe 4 miles away, is all the museums, all the operas, all the libraries, all the wonderful, beautiful stuff going on. So I think it's a matter of neighborhood, and whatever the interest in Earth is, there is a faction. Now, in some aspects of Pat Price papers that unfortunately are not fully public, he does straight out say that he perceived and reported this to Hal, that there are two factions on Earth primarily fighting. Interestingly enough, as Robert said, one had hunkered down in the Himalayas, and another is in a different area. And Pat described quite a bit of that in his publicized assessment of the underground bases, which I did a presentation on at one time. I think it's a real situation. I think there's an aspect to it that is very negative when it comes to human. I highly encourage people, at the very least, please put these contacts through some discretionary process. One of the things that seems very, very clear to me is, and this comes, we had a very interesting talk with Hal Puthoff when we were in Hal's intermediate class. And a lot of what he told us there has now been fully disclosed through the Skinwalker Ranch show. But one of the things that he indicated was that there does seem to be a hostile element to it. And he's been serious about disclosure since 1969. I know a lot of people are saying, oh, he was with the NSA. It's a deception. Lou is a evil, government agent. I just don't think that's so. And I just had the good fortune to spend a couple of hours in a Zoom with one of the witnesses of the Nimitz incident who was on a ship. And I was able to ask him and just listening and looking and feeling his emotion on how that left him. I don't think this is being made up. It's not that there isn't games being played. I think there are, but in this case, oh, I'm sorry. I lost my train of thought. One of the things Hal told us was from his experiences and his knowledge that they can create our perception of them, or at least a filter. He told one story of two individuals who were 10 feet apart, witnessed by numerous other people at the scene. They encountered some sort of a ball of light, and they each had completely different descriptions of the experience, the time that passed, the color of the thing, all of this. I know from some of the work I did, bringing some of this through, that there were kind of layers of, they call them screen memories, but there was like these layers associated with it that if you first approach them, you might take a innocent, naive, or even a benevolent interpretation. But once you break through that layer, and I'm talking about in these memories, recalling even the physical pain and discomfort of the various processes going on, and realize I can't be making this pain up in my body while I'm realizing this, or I can't regenerate this much fear while I'm recalling it. So those things are real to me. So I would say to anybody that wants to reach out, I hope you land a good one. I truly do. I just don't know that the good ones are reaching out to us directly. Normally we go through, walk down the street, the people grabbing us and panhandling and stuff, those are usually not the ones with the good intention. The rest of the people that pass us quietly, they seem to be. So my admonition to anybody, just employ some method of discretion. Don't play around with it, please, because as remote viewers, we're open, we're already perceptive, we're already used to having information trickle in through our preconscious. And that's it. That's the end of my tirade. And like I said, feel free to accept or reject. I'm just telling you what, and I've been pretty diligent about sorting this all out. So anyways, Daz, thank you. And now I'll be quiet.
That was great.
That was
Russell.
great.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
So on the list here, we've got some hands up. So Kiari, would you like to go first?
Okay, sure. Hello, everybody. Sorry, I'm a little bit late. I've got what to me is a more important question after this, because right now we're very obviously on a topic. So on this topic, I wanted to mention two clear things. One, in Mexico, we have a lot, statistically, you wouldn't believe how many people talk about UFOs there. Like, it's just phenomenal, like 10 times more, 20 times more than Canada. But anyways, so we have a lot. The interesting thing, what Russ said that really resonated with me is we also have a lot of what some people would, it's a very Catholic country. So if you're not Catholic, people will often consider you a witch or from the wrong side or whatever. I'm saying that with respect. I was raised in a Catholic family. But the important thing I'm mentioning here is that the body marks that appear on people, including one of my friends, is that we often attribute this to Mexican witchcraft, but we don't know what it is. But the interesting thing is, on the continuing with the UFO alien thing, is that we have this phenomena called brujos, which translates to witch, and they're energy balls. And if you're watching the Wiltshire County videos of the crop circles, there are a few videos that look really similar to the Mexican witches or the brujos. Nobody knows what, in Mexico, nobody knows what they are, but people have a million different theories. But that definitely is attributable to worldwide what's called the UFO phenomena. Now, that's the first part. The second part, I'm really, really interested in this, old Mexican spirituality and all this. And there's these people called graniceros, people that bring the hail, or people that can call a lightning bolt down. So of course, when I heard about PK Man, I read the book. I was watching the Deborah Lynn Katz interview with Jeffrey Mishlove, a relative to PK Man. Fascinating, great. And they mentioned Ted Owens' course that was given, that both of those respectful and honorable people have heard his, well, Jeffrey Mishlove took the course and he recorded it. But PK Man is very much into alien influence on one's own thing and the appearance of UFOs. And his history is actually very well documented, which is unusual. And Russell Targ and Dr. Hal Puthoff have experience with this guy. So anyways, I'm reading the book. Chapter 11, there's a self-improvement course. I do not want anything to do with extraterrestrials or UFOs, and not in a negative way. I'm just not interested. It's not my life path right now. So I'm not interested in that. But I read the course and I did it properly. In other words, I repeated it 4 times. I was in the process of making it into an audio so that I could listen to it while I was sleeping. Because it seems to me like really good new age style self-help information. But unfortunately, very quickly after that, I had an experience in my bed that I told some of you about. But I was like, holy shit, in my life, I've never had anything like that. And I first attributed it to Mexican witches, real witches. In Mexico, we have people where you pay them money and they'll do evil stuff to other people. I'm always on the good side of the tracks. I'm not interested in that nonsense. But I attributed that experience to someone that I don't know trying to attack me. I'm not used to these sort of things. This isn't my normal style of life. So anyways, fine. Then I saw the chat with Deborah Lynn Katz here 1 week ago, and I thought, holy, there's a connection between that and the PK Man stuff that I was just reading the course I had taken. Now, here's the interesting thing. I'm in communication with his son. His son is alive. To me, he seems like a cool guy, my kind of guy. His son sent me a message a day or 2 after without knowing that I had had the experience about the experience. So that to me really rings a bell with what Russell is saying, and that it's quite possible that these, what does he call them? Space intelligence are alive and actively, how would you say, socializing with us or interacting with us? I don't know. But I wanted to put that down, that in Mexico, we have a long history of this, including contemporary history now with what are called UFOs. And the two things might be mixed up with our old history. So that's about it. I'm with Russell on the thing that I think a lot of discretion and care should be taken. And I see no reason trying to elicit the help of extraterrestrials if as humans, we can get our environment and our world together. Thanks for the opportunity, guys.
Thanks for that. And next, with their hand up is Bill. You had your hand up for a while.
Okay, glad I could make it this week, fellas. Had no outage to work. It's probably coming, but not yet. But yeah, what Russell said really kind of hit home, that I haven't had any really interactions with aliens. But when I grew up in Arkansas, one of our family friends, and we just knew he was one of the major UFO investigators, researchers in Arkansas. And so at an early age, I was, back in the 60s as a little kid, was, exposed to it and developed really a lifelong interest. The only thing that ever happened to me is, I don't know what year it was, maybe 65 or 66. I lived in a 2-story house, old house in Arkansas. And I woke up one night and I got out of my bed and went and looked out of the south facing window. And I saw this, I'd say a fleet or something of these blue lights off in the distance, not very close, flying around doing the standard UFO type maneuvers and everything. And I watched it, I don't know how long. And then I went and got back in bed and went to sleep. And that was my only thing that happened like that. But during that whole time, like Russell said, I had all this camera gear and it never crossed my mind to take a picture of it, but it never crossed my mind to go wake my sisters up or my parents up. Because these things were out there, I don't know, I can't say how long, but quite a while. They would be there flying around, disappear, come back. And then I just went to bed. So that was my experience. Nothing bad came of it. I will say this, though. I agree with y'all that trying to go out there and solicit help from these guys, you're probably going to pay a price. They're not going to give that help if they're going to want something in return, more than likely. That's it.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for sharing that. And next up in with their hand up is Rich.
I appreciate it. Skip me if you don't mind. My topic's going to derail this whole thing, so we can wait till later.
Okay. SF then, do you want to comment on this topic? Still muted.
All right, I'm muted. I just want to say my story real quick. I was in my backyard one time, and I remote view too. Like I'm reached high, like at least 70. But I'm just laying right here, in my bench press, and then I just see a star. I think it was there or not, but I caught it, and it just vanished, and it moved to like another part, like a little bit more to this side. And did it, and I kept staring at it because I was like, what was that? And then it went again like 3 or 4 times. But it was taking its time. Like it was like, I guess watching. I don't know what it was doing, but I never experienced with aliens like to look for them or nothing like that. Like even now, I don't even want to remote view it. But it did like shook me up a little bit. Like this things probably are up there. Like it was so fast, it was just blink in and out. And then I think like probably they're just out there all the time. You just never see them. I think that's what they do. That was just my story.
Thanks for sharing that. That was great. And next up then with a question is Pablo.
Hello. So I'm gonna share 3 opinions, just like personal opinions. Everyone is welcome to challenge them or don't agree with them, right? Just wanted to share. But first one is I'm really surprised how different, apparently separated topics always converge into the same thing. You know, one way or another. You start with RV, you end up with this topic and many others, and they go around like in circles. The other thing is that I am attributing this to RV, but probably it's a little bit broader. And I don't want this to sound a little bit cliche, but it's like Steve Jobs said once, you can only connect the dots backward, right? So many things, especially in the past month, have started to make sense, right? More information have come to me, and I've been able to like say, oh, this experience now that I see in this light probably was one of those situations where this phenomena is real, right? But this leads me to the final thought or thing. I sometimes feel that even though many people is well prepared for this, you know, for example, how with all the studies he did, all the experience, even working for the CIA, he saw things that he will probably never be able to talk about. And yet it feels like we're all a bunch of children talking about some really nice modern car that passed by, and we are like trying to guess what will it be. And what we're not realizing is probably later in the future we'll keep evolving to use some kind of word, and we'll finally see, oh, this is what all that was about. That's why I quoted in the chat Bob Dean, may he rest in peace. But especially during his last years, he shared, I think it was probably the last public appearance he made, that things are a little bit more simpler than we think, but yet more complicated at the same time, and that there will be a time where humankind will realize what it is about. It's not yet, but eventually we will be there, right? So what I find, you know, really appealing is that we are able now to talk about this. There's a forum like this, because otherwise you will not be able to talk it freely. We are not like, you know, going into a pub somewhere and secretly in a corner discussing it and wishing no one heard and then be pursued. But yeah, you know, as a finishing touch, I was discussing the previous week a few instances I thought had all the traces of being kind of a contact. And yeah, the other guy was able to describe things that I never said. It was not like, you know, people guessing. He had details, and he said, you know, you will be surprised how many people have this in common. So my point is, we may all have experienced something and we don't really forget. We take it for granted day to day stuff, right? That's everything.
Thank you, and thanks for sharing again. Okay, next up then is Russell again.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out for either people that were here or people that weren't here, last week's talk when John and Deborah were presenting their new book, toward the end of that talk, Deborah encountered or relayed an experience of an encounter of her own. Do you remember that, Daz? And ultimately, it did have negative impacts in her life. And ultimately, she had to do some energy clearing work with an associate to rid herself of the presences that had impinged upon her. So I think, there's someone from within our own community who's obviously very psychic and perceptive that had an experience she shared. It's worth going back and seeing if you didn't see it.
Okay, thanks for that, Russell. And Brett's up next.
Yeah, can you guys hear me? Not sure if my
Yep, hear
mic's
you
working.
fine.
Cool.
Yeah.
So I'll keep this kind of short and sweet, hopefully, but I have a little bit of a hot take, maybe, perhaps, on this topic and remote viewing. And it's in this is premised on that actually kind of a key event for me to even get into and discover remote viewing is, and I wrote about this in my book, but at the beginning of my book, is I actually saw a triangle UFO fly over my head in the middle of the night and go rather slow. It was around 1 a.m. in the morning, and the triangle essentially took off at what I can really only describe as warp speed without making a sound out over the ocean. And so the lights just zipped off, and it was really large too. This was not a tiny craft. Now, is that alien? Is that not alien? Is that, I don't, I can't prove that either way. That could be something that's man-made for all I know, right? But that's what started me down this road into discovering remote viewing more than 10 years ago now. But my hot take on this topic is, I think personally that a lot of the interest in using RV for this area, and I fell into this trap myself. So I'm almost like, it is very reckless by a tremendous amount of people, because it's like sticking your hand into a black box that could have anything in it. It could have a scorpion in it and you get stung. It could have a snake in it, get bit. It could have a little fluffy rabbit and it's perfectly fine, right? But the real question is, you have no idea. And so many people, and I was one of them, this is one of the reasons why I even got into remote viewing, was I wanted to use RV to, like a kid in a candy store kind of pull back layers of reality. What's really there? It was really appealing to me to use remote viewing for that to that effect, but without really having anyone to say, hey, actually take another perspective on it, that maybe doing that is not the wisest thing. And, I've, shared maybe with a couple people some of the ramifications of doing that I just experienced in my own life that were not positive, because I turned my attention to a lot of these things. And it's one of the reasons that I really don't do it anymore at all. It's because I have no interest in those ramifications. And, there's no real point in me going into those stories of what those are, because, those are just my experience. So I don't really share that publicly. But my hot take, I really do think that this should be the opinion that using remote viewing to look at this kind of stuff without having any regard of it affecting you as an individual is not, I think, an opinion that's loud enough out there in the public. I think that it's really unwise of people who have no idea how to interact on that level. I think most of us don't even know how to interact on that level, but to just expect that we can put our attention out there on these things that are real and expect only positive things to happen is, in my personal opinion, stupid. And, I am someone who's been burned by doing it. I had to handle that with other people that are much more intelligent than me on just some of the negative blowback of using RV to that effect. And so maybe it's a kind of a harsh, opinion. It's my own opinion and only mine, but you obviously feel free to disagree. That's just my opinion on it. That's all. Just felt like I should share. That's it.
Brett, if you don't mind me asking, do you feel like that was a result of maybe like your subconscious intention or prior beliefs, and that's why you had a certain experience, or do you think there's no correlation and it's just that's how it is?
I really didn't have any prior belief. I went into it very agnostic, which is how I went into remote viewing even to begin with. Is it came like, ooh, this is really interesting. I'm not sure what this is. Let me find out. So I actually, before even I got into RV or any of this stuff, I was not into this arena at all. I knew nothing. And so I was more of a blank slate. So I don't think it was really affected by anything a priori to the actual stuff that popped up. So if there's one takeaway I could impart on anyone is just be really wise about what you turn your attention to. If in this arena, it's, don't go traipsing into things that you know nothing about, like maybe that's all. Just don't be reckless. That's it.
Did you want to say something, John?
I do. Yeah, just to relay some of my own experiences with transdimensional and other situations regarding UFOs and remote viewing. So I've been a long time acknowledger that UFOs have been real, as I mentioned, since 1953 at least. And I went to UFO conferences and so forth. And it was actually at a conference on New Science and Ancient Wisdom in Berkeley in 1999 that had UFO stuff in it, where I first heard Prue Calabrese. I have a friend, Kathy, who is also into UFOs, and she became Prue's executive secretary in Carlsbad. But before that, she invited me to go to this conference, and I heard Prue talk and took the training with her. And then after that, I learned more about the UFO stuff. Actually, I have to backtrack because in 1996 or so, I was aware that of Farsight Institute, and they were predicting there was going to be a nuclear explosion in New York City. And my son at the time was studying in New York City. And so I looked at them, I looked them up online for what I could find out. This was before I'd gotten into formal remote viewing, but I had done some remote viewing earlier based on Ingo Swann's natural ESP. I tried it, it worked. Then I had young kids. I had to set it aside for 8 years or so. So I checked out Farsight, and my conclusion was I didn't trust them enough to warn my son, because my son didn't believe any of this stuff. He wasn't into it at all. He would hate to leave New York City. He was in college. So I didn't alert him to that. Unfortunately, they were dead wrong. And of course, when I heard Prue speak in 1999, I knew about the background that she had with Farsight. And by that time, Hale-Bopp had happened, and I was aware of Hale-Bopp comet, which if people haven't heard, that's where Prue and Courtney got suckered and snookered and fell for it and went on the Art Bell show. And even after that, both of them have claimed that there was actually something accompanying the Hale-Bopp comet, which to me is highly questionable. So what would I, as a leftist, be doing with these people who were promoting all this weird UFO stuff and remote viewing? Well, when I found out that they had paid viewers who were getting salaries, and I knew that because I knew Don Walker briefly before we got to be real friends, and he was down there in San Diego, close to Carlsbad. Plus, my friend Kathy was offered a job by Prue, so she and her husband moved down to Carlsbad, so they were getting paid. They weren't getting the $80,000 a year, which a few people were getting for a couple of years based on this $1 million amount, as it said, that was donated by a Hollywood star. So when Prue would start tasking these UFO stuff, I remember she tasked me one time, she said, don't you want to task this UFO stuff? I said, Prue, there's no feedback. I don't want to test stuff where there's not feedback. She said, oh, okay. But I did write an article for Daz's 8 Martinis about UFOs over Oakland, California, because viewers had done that. Don and Roma did it. I trashed them. And also there were microfiche in the library, which conveyed what had actually occurred over the skies, according to newspapers. Of course, there was a big flap, and maybe there's a lot of hype put into this. But nonetheless, there seemed to have been some sort of UFO phenomenon over Oakland and over the West Coast, and then moving east in the 1890s. And the sessions that Don and Roma did suggest that there was something weird in the sky that might be related to this matter. So that was the only article I ever wrote about it. But John Vivanco was into this stuff, and I didn't have their experiences, but because they were having a successful business and they were very sharp people, two of the best. John Vivanco and Prue are two of the best viewers that have ever come along, as well as analysts, as well as having enough business skill to run a successful business. And you know how few of those there have been. So they had all that going. So all this other UFO stuff, even though I believe in UFOs, but I wasn't experiencing it, I just said, okay, well, that's the way it is. We're learning, we're being taught, we're tasking, we're doing projects, we're working with the FBI, we're working with people in Britain over the missing people's cases and so forth, like that. So that's just my experience. I explained some of this in my book, and there's more details, but those are the essence of how it came down in transdimensional.
Thanks for that, John. That was great background. I think, Rich, you're still waiting for the next topic, aren't you? Okay, so SF, then, do you want to go again and ask a question? No? Okay, then we're back to Pablo again, or is Pablo asked his?
Yeah, sorry, I raised my hand again. Thanks to Brett. He brought something back to my mind. So after the APP, sessions, probably 1 week ago. Well, time goes fast. So I shared something back with Tom and Russell. So basically, long story short, I started RV because the friend that told me to try it. We were doing some physics work, and he told me, people is complaining they don't have microscopes, but this technique can be used for that purpose. We found some articles regarding that, and the cool thing is that you could get feedback one way or another, right? You could do something, design something, and then try a few experiments, lab experiments, to see whether what you got was right or not. At some point in time, this guy, which I could verify many of his credentials and so on, we started talking about Ingo. He met Ingo a few times. He also met Hal like 3 times. I got copies of some of his emails that were exchanged with Hal, for example. Got emails that cannot be shared, are still, for a few people only, and I will respect that. And shared with Russell and Tom what I could share, right? Just still looking for a few things, trying to contact his family to see if we can find his belongings, a few more details, because he recently passed away. But all of this is related that he shared with me at some point around the starts of the 70s, when I mean he and a few others working with him met Ingo. He did not RV, he did something like PK with a camera, where he got a picture of the rover on Mars. Sorry, the rover on the moon. And similarly to that, Uri Geller did something like that. Ted Sirius did something like that. And the funny thing is that he warned me. He told me, hey, there's stuff you should not meddle with, or at least not in that depth, because you will get burned. And that's what I agree with Brett. You cannot be reckless. I faced that when I asked too much about it. I got firsthand experience with people, I don't say from our place, but people kind of sending you a message, stop checking into this. And what pops in my mind is, it's like when the grown-ups hear that the kids talking about something, and when it goes out of the limit, they need to step in, right? So the same thing applies here. He shared, and a few other people around his circle shared, including Bob Dean, that whenever you dig too much into subjects like his book Penetration, you will end up finding things that he kind of artistically painted a little bit different, and you should not be getting near unless you are willing to get burned. So recklessness can only lead to a few things if you're not prepared. And I completely agree with Brett. I'm just sharing this. Take it as anyone wants, just sharing. But I think it's important because we need to look out for each other and make sure that we don't just jump out of the cliff, right?
Yeah, if I could just say one more thing to that. I mean, thanks, Pablo, for sharing that. And I wish when I began this, that there was someone out there who was saying that, who had that opinion a little bit more loudly in the community, where it's like, be a little bit more responsible where you put your attention, because it's not, Daz says this all the time. He tries to emphasize this on Facebook. Remote viewing is not a toy. And so understand that, it's there can be consequences to you misusing it. So, and I'm not trying to also fearmonger either. That's really not what I'm trying to do, but just be smart. It's like, don't be reckless about what you're turning your attention to, whether that's for an unknown tasker or whether that's towards, a type of intelligence that literally nothing about. You know what I mean? So be smart. That's all. That's, use a little bit of caution. That's it.
Okay, thanks, guys. That's been a great chat so far. Has anyone else got anything they want to add on the kind of
Yes, I
alien
do.
UFO front? Go for it.
Just as a footnote, so I forgot to mention, so Prue and Philip K. Dick both received huge inflows of thought balls that flooded their mind with all kinds of information. Other people have referred to this recently, I think from Philip K. Dick. So, Prue's book has a lot about Bob, this guy Bob, and also the gray dude and these thought balls. And one of the thought balls, or one of the messages that the gray dude conveyed to her, was this thing about the big event, which I wrote about in my book. So the big event, what was that? So the gray dude said, well, looky, we're going to have a huge event in the world, and transdimensional systems is going to be intimately involved and play a major role. So what did Prue do? She assigned this thing, hundreds of sessions we did on the big event that the gray dude had suggested to her. Well, the big event never happened, as far as I know, and as far as anybody else knows. So it was a huge waste of time that talking about, having aliens task you or involved with what you're doing. That would be a prime example of something that in retrospect looks really silly or, clearly unworth doing. But Prue was sincere. She was a genius in many ways. She believed it. We did it. What can I say? It was part of this large company that was successful for a time and then finally crashed for various reasons that have been discussed elsewhere. I'll leave it at that.
Excellent stuff, guys. I think unless anyone's got anything to add on this topic, I think we've run the ground on this one. Has anyone got anything they want to add on this?
One last comment on this question I've got. I promise I'll stop. You have to wonder, all these flybys and that U.S. Navy's reporting and everything. You got to wonder what would be the point in those UFOs or aliens or whatever they are to be hanging around all those ships all the time, because they could just hang around them a little bit and learn what their capabilities are. So there wouldn't really be any need for this constant surveillance or interaction. It seems kind of odd. That's all I would say. I don't have any idea why that would be, but it doesn't seem like they would be doing that. But
yeah, I don't know. You have a point there, actually, because in some cases, the pilot said that the UFOs were interacting, or UAPs were interacting for a period of 2 years. So that's it. That's an interesting one. Maybe they have a sense of humor and they find it funny. I don't know.
That would be great. We're just pranking you guys. That would be amazing.
yeah, I kind of like hanging out with my boss's dogs here at work. They're gone right now, so maybe that's it.
Yeah. Okay, well, we did a poll on this, and the poll says, I'm not sure if everyone did it, but 92% of the people in the chat answered the poll, and 49% of the people said yes, they've had a UFO or alien experience. 18% said no, and another 33% said maybe. So, out of all the people here, and there's 43 people here at the moment, that's quite a high number. So I'll end the poll on that one now, and I'll share the results so you can all see that. I don't know if you can download it. Oh, yeah, it's got a download button, so you can download the poll results if anyone wants to keep that. And Rich, do you want to move on to your second subject? Because I think we finished this one.
Sure. I think the download thing might just be for you since you're a moderator. I don't see it anyway. Maybe.
Okay, I've got the download, so I can put the poll results in wherever I put the videos for upload on YouTube. I'll put a link to the file on that for everyone to have as well.
Cool.
Actually, I might be able to share it in the chat window as well.
Yeah, I guess my next topic is dependent upon Russell. I just had a question for him. Is my understanding that you've been practicing remote viewing for 3 years? Please correct me if I'm wrong, obviously. But then you were talking about how put off and things like this. So if you wouldn't mind sharing, I'm just always so interested in people's backgrounds, how they got into stuff. Would you mind sharing a little bit about you?
Daz, is that cool with you? Okay, I'll make it short because it's not that exciting of a story. I was browsing online one day on the Jeff Rentz website, which is kind of a conspiracy platform. In the banner ads on the side column, I saw remote viewing. And I was like, oh, what is this? So I clicked on that and ended up doing a little bit of a search, which landed me at the remote viewing manual. Downloaded it in my office, printed it out, took it home, and my impression of it was, as a military manual. Having been in the military myself, and used tech manuals, which are usually like 14 pages on how to undo a screw, I was just stunned when I started seeing words like matrix and reading and just going, what is this? So I located Paul's website this was probably August maybe of 2010, contacted him. He was booked for, I don't know, 6 months. I was ready to go operational as a remote viewer in 90 days. So I passed on scheduling with Paul, found an immediate opening with Ed Dames in Sparks, Nevada. And I think it was October of 2010. Went down there, took 2 days of live training, just a Saturday, Sunday course. Came back home, did his DVD, did his master's DVD, did some other things. Ultimately, I just simply was not that good. The product I was getting was disappointing. I mean, I had enough, but maybe not. So I quit practicing sessions. And then I just got into pure study, got very interested in Ingo, found everything that was available at the time, ordered all of his books, and just kind of went crazy for a while. During that, I discovered Ingo's online autobiography, Remote Viewing, The Real Story. And in it, he had mentioned, I think there's 4 or 5 pages in there about his Scientology experience. I left Scientology a year after Ingo did. The last recorded transaction he had there was 1982, and I left in 1983, which was a very intense and unpleasant experience. So when I read in maybe 2011 or something, his story, I thought, man, it's like I left that behind. Here he went. So what I did was just happened to, like a guy, driving around the Puget Sound around Seattle to Bellevue, about 70 miles away, who was actually L. Ron Hubbard's personal auditor from like 1963 to 1966. And he had a very reasonable rate for doing sessions. So I did a very significant number of hours of sessions with him. Got even more interested, and then I found some people around here and there, as far away as Germany, that all had trained during the same episode of time Ingo had. A couple of them had actually been in courses with Ingo. So I put out a fair amount of money to get trained to, what Ingo and what the group and other Scientologists that were around remote viewing, the OT7 level. And that really was just intended to walk a mile in Ingo's shoes. What the hell was behind all of this? And I mean, these were very serious people. And then I flew a trainer here from Europe for the last of the upper level training. And trust me, there's no secret nonsense. There's no mystical revelations, none of that. That was PR. The only valid point to those levels, if you will, was that they were an appropriate gradient. If just like, so if someone walks in the door to the remote viewing community and suddenly you just throw them into stage 6 and throw them into contact with an alien. I mean, people. So that was the only valid point to those secret levels. There's nothing behind them that anybody's missing, and I promise you. Even Ingo said that in one of his Scientology interviews. So then a little over 3 years ago, I was sitting right where I'm sitting now, and something said, get back into remote viewing. And I'm like, And so I thought, well, I'll take a reach at it. And that led to a series of events where we were looking at instructors on YouTube. My girlfriend, Nancy, and our housemate, Catherine, who have incredible intuition. So they're kind of like guides, if you will, for me. So we were going through, and then Paul came on, and they both at the same time pointed from the separate parts of the living room. That's your instructor. And I said, well, that's the guy I contacted the very first time. And they're like, that's your instructor. So I signed up and I took Paul's basic course. Then I took his sketching course. Then I took his intermediate course. Then I took his week-long or 5-day long operational course. And then I took his advanced course. And the difference was significant. I actually started having some good correspondence. And then, I've even, like everybody, landed a few sessions where you're just like, how the hell did that happen? And since then, I'm just, I'm pretty much dedicated to this, and I'm going to continue this path and learn what I can learn, and that's it. So hopefully that answers your question.
No, in hindsight, I apologize for putting you on the spot, but that was very interesting. Thank you for sharing.
No, I don't feel on the spot. I just don't like to go on and on about it. But so anyways, yeah, so it's been a little, so October, November, December, got to count on my fingers. November, December, January, February, March, April, May, June. So 10 years and 8 months I've been involved. I basically, like I said, washed out in the first round. And then now this last little over 3 years with Paul, I can't promote training enough.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you for sharing, and glad you stuck with it.
Thanks, Russell. I see that Kiara has got his hand up again.
Okay, I'm going to go in a little bit different direction and it's a really great RV direction. A couple of years ago, I met a gentleman who spoke 8 languages. I used to be a language teacher. He gave me a copy of his book. He explained that if you want to teach people something, get them motivated about it. Find out what it is that might make them really want to learn whatever it is you're teaching, so that they have their own personal motivation to learn, and they might even go faster and stronger than the teacher. Of course, because I've taught a lot of people, I thought, oh, he's right. How come I didn't see that? So here's the question. The question for everybody here, especially those that have been practicing RV forever and teaching it, and then the rest, all of you. What motivates you, or what have you found that motivates students to learn and practice RV? And of course, when I say remote viewing, I mean ideograms, AOL, verifiable feedback, things like that.
Anyone want to answer?
I will give it a shot, Kiao. So I started, as I mentioned, for scientific purposes, another tool in the tool bag. Of course, the curious thing, and I was warned by the guy that taught me RV, is as you progress, you get a little bit more sensitive, and you start asking new questions, and you start wondering about new things. So that's how it happened. What kept me motivated is not only because it worked, amazingly it worked, but because I kept discovering new things little by little. Of course, I had like similar to Russell, and probably because we did the first same training. I had like a blackout period, and then one way or another, I kept coming back to RV, got motivated, and I gotta say how it is one of the key things why I'm really motivated right now. It's because of Das and all these meetings, everything he has published. Then you got Russell and a lot of other people in the community that made me feel way much better about how things are progressing, and that keeps me motivating, wanting to learn more and participating. So thank you very much, everyone. And I hope I answered your question, Kiao.
Bear with me a minute while I let some people in. Anyone else got anything to say on this one? What motivates you, or what have you found that motivates students to learn and practice?
Can I say
RV?
something, Daz?
Hey, God.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Well, I sort of came into teaching remote viewing because Mike Webster, who taught me, passed away, but I'd already started helping him and supporting him in his teaching. And I just love connecting with people and understanding my experiences of life before I was into remote viewing. And coming from a complementary therapy background, I think that really helped with the protection and things like that. But also it's helped me to understand how I perceived life, which was normal for me, and connecting with people that are used to having alien experiences and things like that, which isn't usual in all of society to share things like that. And it's just lovely to be able to just be normal with people and have the extraordinary being more normal.
Thanks for sharing, Julie. That was a great answer. Anyone else want to answer this question?
Yes, I can't actually raise my hand right now. I'm driving. I guess what really motivates me, besides the opportunity to make money and see myself learning a skill, is a lot of motivation comes from my friendships with people on the remote viewing Discord. People like David and Grin Spigot. They really just constantly working with them, seeing what they can do, really helps me push myself to see how I can rise and learn from a lot of their methods, etc. It's been very helpful.
Another great reply. Thanks for that. Anyone else want to answer this question for Kiao?
I'll throw one additional thing in there because I think it's important. When I came back from Ed Dames training, I got together a group of 2 people. Nancy, who's now my girlfriend, but wasn't back then, and then Catherine, who's also just a friend, who's now our housemate. And Catherine couldn't afford to go to the training, so I bought her the DVD set to do while I was gone. When it came back, she showed me this feedback from the DVD and her session. And I was like, oh, no, you're not supposed to, you've got to. And she's like, no, I stopped the DVD. I did the session. Then I looked at the feedback. I'm like, well, and so I couldn't believe her results as I went through her book. I tasked her a few times myself. And when I saw like her 4th time, knowing I was the only one in the world, now this was only single blind, but knowing I was the only one in the world, I cried, and it's still emotional to me to this day because it was the awakening, the realization. Once you spend so many years trying everything, meditation, blah, 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 it's all subjective. There was nothing like remote viewing. And at that moment, her work is what caused me to not quit entirely. And that's when I went on to study. She had, so Nancy and Catherine both have converted to CRV from TRV. They produced some sessions, 2 of Catherine's sessions. Paul, I sent to Paul for Target Vault, and he couldn't post them because her drawing was the feedback. And she is, her and Nancy both picked it up and exceeded me quickly, which is a great humility. You teach them and suddenly they're better than you. So the product, and this is where I'm about, have someone do a session, see if the first timers affect this kind of thing. But it was seeing it work that inspired me. You could talk about it all day, but when you see it work, I think it inspires students and instructors alike.
I just want to say something. Well, if I may, I find about RV in, let's say, extraordinary circumstances, when it was about a dear person who was about to die, and starting to ask and to want more about consciousness and what's behind this. And so after a while, I saw about RV somewhere. And 2 years prior of this, I came across Ingo's name in just by chance in an article, and all the thing was extraordinary also, but I let it down and I forgot. I completely forgot it until, well, 2 years later. And I started this and I thought, oh my, I can find out everything and about everyone just by staying on a white piece of paper and like pen and write there something or think or not think on something. And I met extraordinary people here in the community. And I started with Lori. It was awesome. I dreamed for a year about Daz training and styling, and now I'm with Daz, of course, and so I thank him for that. But I think all you guys are awesome, and all your experiences and all your trainings, all your projects are inspirational for me. So this is it. Thank you very much.
Great answers, everyone. I'll add a quick one to the list. I started getting into psychic stuff when I was about 10 years old. I was luckier than most people because my household was very psychic friendly environment. My mother was a clairvoyant medium, and she ran the local spiritualist church for a couple of decades. So there was a big library of books and everything. So it was very easy for me to get into this. When I was 15 years old, because from the age of 12 onwards, I was keeping what we class as in classical techniques a psychic diary. So every time you have an experience, you write it down in your diary and you record it. I wrote when I was 15 years old in 1985 that one day I would find a technique that would allow me to time travel with the mind. Of course, I didn't really know what I was talking about back then. And then in 1992, roughly 7 years later, at a UFO conference, I heard for the first time about remote viewing in a taped conversation about Ed Danes talking about what he did for the government. And then literally since then, I've spent my entire life learning everything I can about RV. And over the last 2 years, although I've never really wanted to, I have to be honest, but over the last 2 years, I have started mentoring a couple of people a year. And I'm quite lucky at the moment to have a past mentored student in the group here listening, and two, including Dimi, who is going through training right now, or mentoring. I prefer the word mentoring rather than training. And I find that they're an inspiration because it's amazing to see how someone starts developing their intuitive skill and how they progress through the RV process. It could be any process. I'm using CRV, but it could be anyone. But it's amazing to see how they open up and how they blossom, and the smiles on their faces when they realize that they're actually getting, they're getting it and they're getting the data. That's my motivation at the moment. So has anyone else got anything to add on that one, or should we move on to their subject? Oh, Brett's got something to say, I believe.
Yeah, I could add to that topic real quick before you move on. Kind of the genesis of me starting with RV to where I am today, it definitely has shifted a lot. I started it because I had some really amazing first timer effect sessions. And I mean, for me originally, my motivation to keep learning more and getting better is I wanted to use it to for mysteries targets. That was my main motivation. And obviously that came with, from the past topic. Oh, little did I know, sometimes what you wish for, you be careful what you wish for, because you just might get it. But since then, it changed rather dramatically to how can I use RV in a grounded, useful way. And that would be not just helpful to myself, but also that other people could also do and help other people. And I know a lot, it's very much split in the RV community on this topic, on the application of RV for this. But for the past several years, I've been using and spending the majority of my time using RV in the market, and rather successfully. And one of the things that I've been doing, I've only done one presentation on this about a year ago, but kind of my goal is to have about like 5 years of work showing all the detailed sessions, what I've discovered, how much money I've made, in a very long, kind of undeniable presentation and document. It probably end up being a book someday, but daddy say, hey, here's where it's like, you can't say, listen, here's interesting RV, that allows people to write off. It's like, people understand hard cash. They understand, here's a statement from an account that's made X amount of money. And, if there's multiple ways to kind of corroborate that and prove that, I feel that's a really interesting way to get people more interested into developing themselves. And that's kind of the first step with this. After that, well, okay, great. I get to that point. My second motivator for that is to then use that money to funnel it back into remote viewing. And that would be I want to fund a school for remote viewing. I want to fund an actual research and development lab that continues. Like, I'm only one person. There's a tremendous amount of really good viewers out there. This is something similar that who was talking about? John, you talked about when he was talking about TDS, where there was a benefactor who had a lot of money, said, hey, pay some reviewers a really good salary to just really work and develop remote viewing. Like, if that's something that could exist on the scene again, like that's something I'd love to see. And if I can, in the future, kind of help fund that in some way, that's something that I really want to do genuinely. And, maybe the third branch of that would be something like an actual applications group. If there's a school and a research and development lab for RV and kind of continuing those techniques, then maybe there could be a third branch of people come out of that also can make money by applying it towards, client work. And so that kind of vision is what's kind of kept me, one more in the short term is, to do something that's a little bit more grounded than the esoteric stuff, which I spent a lot of years remote viewing, and that's in financial markets with RV. But then the long-term vision that's kind of kept me motivated. And I know a lot of the other people that I work with, they've just shown up in my life with very similar visions. How synchronicity often works, but is in the future is to have some sort of a remote viewing school and kind of research lab. That's something that, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but it's definitely a big goal that keeps me motivated to keep going, doing what I'm doing. So practical applications, I think, is something that are a little bit, it's so nuanced, I feel. So they're not, as you tell someone about remote viewing, it's like, oh, interesting, what can you do with it? And someone says, well, you can find your lost keys. And it's like, no one cares at all about that. No one cares at all about finding your it's, people, to me, what really clicked with me is like, what do people actually care about that aren't remote viewing, that it'll stick with them? And that's the practical application that they could use it to, pay their bills, to make a living off of. And it's, a lot of people don't like that use of RV, and that's fine. But that's one of the things that myself and some of the people that I work with that are really good remote viewers, we see as an avenue to kind of attract people to say, hey, check this out. There's a way more you can do with it than just making money, obviously, but it's a way to kind of get a little bit more validation in a larger community that may think that this isn't even real. So those are some of the motivations of me, and not only just me, but a number of the other viewers that I even work with on kind of what our thinking is and what our goals are. So anyway, that's it.
Thanks, Brett. David, you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, go on, seeing as we're all doing this. So when I first got into RV, I was like a materialist, reductionist. I didn't believe in any of this stupid woo-woo stuff. And I came to a point in my life where I knew I'd missed a trick, like I'd missed something, but I had no idea what it was, but I knew it must be a bit out there. And I spent months trawling through all of like the conspiracy trash on the internet, trying to find something that I could test myself without signing up to somebody's course for $600 or whatever and doing wearing their special hat that I have to buy, and then found RV and was like, well, that's not going to work, is it? But I told myself, I'm going to find something I can test. And I tested it, it worked, and it was like, shit. It's the feedback, right? The feedback keeps me honest, because we can sit and do these weird meditations or spiritual practices or whatever. We can have all these experiences, and how do we know it's not just our imagination? With RV, we know it's not just our imagination, and it keeps me honest in my other woo-woo practices. That I know I've developed that skill, and I know what that perception feels like, and I'm not sitting here deluding myself. So it's a good yardstick for my personal development, and it stops me going off on one and being like, yes, the aliens told me the truth. Like, you can't do that, can you, when there's feedback? So that's just a quick one. I'll shush now. But I wanted to chuck that in there. I'm not against making loads of money with it either, but that's not what keeps me motivated. That's just nice.
Thanks, David, for sharing that one. And I think Sasha's on the board for next.
Yeah, thank you. And David kind of said part of what I wanted to say, which was I think I'd had experiences that led me to believe when I was younger that there was more than the materialist perspective on reality. But I really looked to science to make meaning and to, I guess, answer my questions, to make sense of the world, to find, not just the nature of the world, but of my role within it. And I didn't find that. And I found science just became it's so meaningless, I guess. You're going through the motions, right? Chemistry is so fascinating when you start getting into it. But then the deeper you get into it, the more meaningless it seems, right? And I don't think it offers context. And I don't think it fills I don't know. I think for people who have an instinct that there is more than this, and you just kind of want validation for that, and you go into science thinking you'll find that, and it's just not there. And also science always gets corrected because it can never offer truth. It only offers the best understanding in the current moment with our current limitations. And so if you believe in whatever science says today, then 2 years later, oh, whoops, we were wrong. The diameter of the proton, we were completely wrong. And now we have better instruments, and now we have a new value. So the value you memorized and you held as truth, well, that was not truth. But the new value, that's truth. And so I think in science, truth is always changing if you mistake science for truth, for fact, right? And so I think with remote viewing, there's a sense that you can access more meaning, but I feel that I get demotivated when it starts feeling the same. When I start thinking of remote viewing as this is just a practice where I can figure out what image is related to this string of numbers. And then I get demotivated and I stop doing it because that doesn't give me a sense of meaning. And it validates the sense that, okay, there's more to my senses than the ones science describes. But that can start feeling empty pretty quickly if all I'm using it for is, oh, it's the Eiffel Tower associated to these 7 numbers. And so I think what Brett was describing is a lot more powerful than it might seem on the surface, which is that using remote viewing to raise funds, to teach remote viewing in a way, because there is meaning to be found in remote viewing. But I think it's very slippery. It comes and goes. And so I think having an application that you can see not only that it's real, but also that it allows you to live in this world without having to compromise yourself in the different ways that work requires us to compromise ourselves. I think that that's powerful as well, just that freedom that it allows. So that's all I kind of wanted to say. It's a little bit jumbled.
Sasha, thanks for sharing, as usual. It's an interesting topic, isn't it? And I've seen over the years many people strive for where they can fit remote viewing or where they can take remote viewing. And I say to everyone, you have to find your own way, really, because we're all different. But there are no limitations to what you can do with remote viewing. If you want to make money with it, make money with it. That's your aim. If you want to teach it, teach it. But I've also said that there should be aims out there where we maybe club together and do some humanitarian type projects as well, or some science related projects. I think they would be good in the general mix. It's like, I think it's like everything in life. It's good to have a bit of balance. If you do it, you make a bit of money, you also do a bit of humanitarian stuff as well to balance that up. But great questions and answers, everyone. Bear with me a second while I let someone else in. If anyone else has any questions they want to ask.
Maybe just to
Yes.
kill that topic, sorry, because I think we're done, aren't we, on that topic?
Just wanted to add something, yeah.
Okay, I'll say one quick thing, and then you're
Go
on,
for it.
Pablo. I learned since 2012. I used to know a bunch of people that have disappeared family because of their political activity, and I tried to teach a group of 13 of them once. And I learned in this long, every year mentor. Daz is correct. I've learned in this mentoring process only recently that I will not mentor anyone unless they're ready to do 28 practice sessions alone. After, of course, I showed them how to do it. Why? Because once they get that independent confirmation, it just blows the doors open. It's like the others have mentioned. Really, if you're going to mentor, make sure they can do it themselves and they have that success, because it's a huge, huge game changer. Also, of course, I totally agree with Daz on the humanitarian thing. I also present those ideas to them as part of my motivational things. For example, medical applications, et cetera, et cetera. Thanks.
And Kiao, thanks for sharing that, because one way or another it relates. So when Sasha was speaking, I was thinking, I live in a third world. No, sorry, my mistake. Now it's a second world country, because there are others that got worse, right? But you will be amazed that probably right now more than 70% of the population doesn't know how to write or read. And why do I mention this is that I feel that remote viewing needs also to be appreciated in this way. It's like when you're teaching someone to write or read, and part of the corporate social responsibility programs we go to schools and they help scarce resources children to get to this. And the first barrier we get is that they tell you, why should I learn about this? I will not get a job because of this, and everything is boring. But if you get patient enough, you teach them the basics and you let them discover, because not everyone likes the same kind of books, for example, then you're amazed at the reaction. They find their own way. They're amazed. Oh, I didn't know this before. One thing was to hear from other people. One completely different thing is to experience it. So I will go back to Ingo talking in a few videos of his experiential. Experience is everything. You cannot translate that to other person. You cannot share that with other person. You need to help them, enable them to experience it, and then decide by themselves, right? That was just my final note on the subject.
Anyone else have anything to add on that, or are we moving on to a new topic?
Daz,
Hi there. Go for it.
This may sound a bit unusual. Why am I saying that in this group? When I had my clinical practice, and I did trauma-informed care, so this was people who'd had very different types of experiences. We're not talking about abduction or whatever. We're talking about everyday, the horrors that can happen, and the people who perpetrate them. by asking questions of, well, what was it's now that I know it, it's what Lori Williams calls the ambiance exercise. But I would ask, what was happening before this? I didn't do deep hypnotic regression on this, but I would ask these questions that would, because they had been told, you're just too sensitive. You need to go back out there, get back on the horse, blah, blah, all those positive, that toxic positivity that people usually throw at someone who's had a bad experience, which is very similar to having them tune in to themselves. Just like in remote viewing, you have to open up and tune in. And by using some similar principles, people were healing. So when Brett talks about, expand, everyday applications, like someone can earn money, which is the currency of our lives in the material world, to have enough food to eat, to have a room, that you have a lock on the door and all that kind of thing. And Pablo was just mentioning another currency, which is literacy, which is something most people don't think about in the world that I live in. But just being able to live a safe life. I mean, remote viewing, I had one client who told me that she would have visions or these dreams, or she would know about something, and then she couldn't tell anybody because they thought she was psychotic because she had severe PTSD. And of course, at the time, I wasn't using any particular, I was using TI's trauma-informed care, but it was the same types of things. It's like, let's go through, of course, I didn't say, let's go through the experience you had. It was a guided type of situation. And she began to differentiate between memory projected fear, and she discovered that she used to call it, this isn't witchcraft, because she was involved in one of these evangelical churches. That was what was saving her soul from all the things that happened. And it was, but she began to be able to sense things and to begin to live a safer life. And that just meant the world to me. So to me, that's a practical application, is giving people the tools to stay in tune with the environment around them, and to begin to understand that it's very practical to live with this ability, and to whether it's earning money or being in a safe place, or checking out what's going to happen 2 days from now when you're going to be in some other place. So that's been my best experience with it. Thanks.
Thanks, Ida. Thanks for sharing your experiences with us. Okay, I've got no questions up on or hands raised at the moment. Has anyone got, because we're approaching 10:45 here, so nearly 2 hours. Anyone got any topics that they'd like to talk about or discuss here, or any questions you want to ask from any of the people that we have here in the participants list? Nothing. I guess we may have run our course for today's evening then, and we can close a bit early.
I think that I will have some subjects for the next next call, because otherwise it will become, instead of 2 hours, 4 hours. But yeah, there's a lot to talk, and if I could have joined earlier, probably I would brought the subject on stage 7 that was recently discussed.
Okay. Yeah.
I think many of us may have had a few instances like what Tom described during the session. And I think will be a great topic for the next talk. But again, a great excuse to have a next talk, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I've got a couple of people I'm talking to at the moment. I'm trying to get back in touch with Joe at the moment, Joe McMoneagle, to see if we can get him back on, because I think he's on the mend now. So yeah, we'll see what develops over the next couple of weeks on talks. But yeah, thanks for everyone for turning up again. You know, it's a Friday night. Most people, well, a Friday night here in the UK, so most people are out enjoying themselves and stuff. So yeah, it was great to chat to you all. Have a great weekend, and we'll be back next week with something else to chat about.
Terrific.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for your contributions, everyone. Take care.
Sure. Bye bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Night. Thanks, Dad.
All right. See you soon.